In 1953, a woman named Donna Lupe in Guanajuato packed enchiladas into tin containers every morning for her husband before he walked into the silver mines. She did this for 22 years. Those enchiladas are number 6 on this list. Number 17 is a Mayan dinner older than Mexico itself. Number 1 takes 3 days to make, and almost no family has the patience for it anymore. These 25 dinners were not invented in restaurants. They were invented in kitchens where women stretched 1 chicken, a handful of dried chiles, and a bag of beans into meals that kept entire families alive. They fed workers coming home with dust on their boots, and children who did not know the family was poor. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten Mexican dinners no one makes anymore. Number 25. Entomatadas. This was the weeknight dinner that never got famous. Corn tortillas dipped in a simple tomato sauce made from roasted tomatoes, garlic, and onion. Filled with crumbled queso fresco. Topped with a drizzle of crema and a few rings of raw onion. That was the whole recipe. No chiles, no complicated mole, just tomatoes and tortillas and cheese. Your abuela made this on Tuesday nights when there was nothing else in the kitchen and everybody still needed to eat. The tomato sauce took 10 minutes. The tortillas were already there. A pound of tomatoes cost less than $1 at the mercado. And the queso fresco lasted the whole week. Entomatadas are one of the forgotten sisters of enchiladas, alongside enfrijoladas and enmoladas. They trace back to Mayan era cooking. Rarely found on any restaurant menu outside of Mexico. Not spicy enough to be famous. Not fancy enough to be remembered. Just the quiet dinner that said I love you without raising its voice. Number 24th. Enfrijoladas. Enfrijoladas are the same idea as enchiladas, but instead of chile sauce, you dip the tortillas in a rich black bean sauce. You take a pot of refried beans, blend them smooth with a little broth, and heat that sauce until it coats the back of a spoon. Then you drag each tortilla through, fill it with cheese or shredded chicken, roll it tight and spoon more bean sauce on top. Queso fresco. Crema. Cilantro. Done. A bag of dried black beans cost about $1 and made enough sauce for the whole family twice over. This was the enchilada's humble sister that nobody talked about. The same love, the same tradition, but made with beans because that is what you had. An ancient variation of enchiladas dating all the way back to Mayan times. In Veracruz and Oaxaca, enfrijoladas are still part of Day of the Dead celebrations. Families place a plate of them on the altar to feed the spirits of those who have passed, feeding the dead the food of the living. Rarely found on any restaurant menu outside Mexico. A dinner that crossed the boundary between this world and the next, made from nothing more than beans and corn. Number 23. Chicharrón en salsa verde. The crunch of pork rinds softening in bubbling green salsa. That sound was the dinner bell in kitchens across Mexico for generations. You started with tomatillos, green chiles, cilantro, garlic, and onion. All blended into a bright, tangy salsa. Then you broke the chicharrón into rough pieces and dropped them into the pot. The rind soaked up the sauce, turning from crispy shards into soft, chewy pillows of flavor. Served in tacos, over rice and beans, or next to fried eggs for a dinner that doubled as tomorrow's breakfast. Chicharrón has roots in pre-Hispanic Mesoamerica. The Aztecs used every part of the animal, including the skin. A bag of chicharrón at the market cost almost nothing. This was home cooking at its most honest. You took the cheapest thing available and turned it into dinner. Abuela's hands breaking the chicharrón into the pot. Food for the soul that cost less than $2 to make. The taste of childhood in a single bite. Number 22. Pacholas, the original Mexican hamburger that nobody remembers. Ground beef mixed with rehydrated ancho chile, cumin, garlic, and a little bread, then flattened on the metate until paper thin. Fried quickly in a hot skillet until the edges crisped. and the center stayed juicy. Served with salsa, beans, and a stack of warm tortillas. No buns. No ketchup. According to the Larousse Diccionario Enciclopédico de la Gastronomía Mexicana, pacholas are a very old dish, possibly pre-Hispanic, from Jalisco, Guanajuato, Michoacán, and Zacatecas. They were called meat tortillas because that is exactly what they looked like. Thin rounds of spiced beef eaten the way you eat a taco. The metate was the key. That grinding stone gave the meat a texture no food processor can replicate. But the metate is gathering dust in the garage now. Nobody has the time or the arms for it. A dish that required a tool most families had turned into a decoration. A pound of ground beef, a couple of dried chiles, and a piece of bread. That was the cost. The pachola disappeared when the metate did. Number 21. Arroz con pollo. The one-pot dinner that fed 7 people for under $5. Mama bought chicken thighs and drumsticks because they were the cheapest cuts at the carniceria. She seared them in oil until the skin turned golden and crispy. Then in went the rice, tomato puree, diced vegetables, cumin, Mexican oregano, and chicken broth. One pot, one burner. 40 minutes covered on low heat. The rice absorbed every drop of that chicken-flavored broth and turned a deep orange red from the tomato. The chicken fell off the bone. Arroz con pollo came from Spain, related to paella, brought to the Americas by the conquistadors. But the Mexican version made it its own with cumin and chiles, and that particular way of frying the rice first until each grain was coated in oil. The crispy skin stuck to the bottom of the pot. That was always fought over. Everyone wanted that piece. A dish that proves you do not need money to eat like royalty. Number 20. Sopa de fideo. The first thing you learned to cook. Mama let you stand on a chair and stir the fideo noodles while they toasted golden in a little oil. Then she added the tomato sauce, garlic, onion, and chicken broth. The pot hissed and bubbled, and filled the kitchen with a smell that meant home was working the way it was supposed to. Fideo noodles are thin vermicelli that came to Mexico with the Spanish conquistadors, alongside garlic and onion. By the middle of the 20th century, sopa de fideo was the most common first course in Mexican households. It was served before the main dish, ate la comida, the big afternoon meal. A box of fideo cost less than 50 cents. The tomato sauce was already in the pantry. This was the Mexican equivalent of chicken noodle soup. What mothers made when children were sick. What families ate on Wednesday nights because it was simple, cheap, and tasted like everything was going to be fine. Food made with what you had, served when someone needed to feel taken care of. Number 19. Picadillo. Ground beef, potatoes, carrots, tomato sauce, garlic, onion, and cumin. Browned together in one skillet in under 30 minutes. That was the Tuesday night dinner nobody posts on social media. In northern Mexico, picadillo was just meat and potatoes in tomato sauce. In central Mexico, they added olives, raisins, and capers for a sweet, savory combination that sounds strange until you taste it and realize it is one of the most addictive things you have ever eaten. The word comes from the Spanish picar, meaning to chop or mince. This was colonialism's kitchen meeting indigenous spice. A pound of ground beef, a couple of potatoes, a can of tomato sauce. $3 and change to feed a family of 4. Served with tortillas, it stretched even further. Served on tostadas, it became a different meal entirely. Picadillo was the dinner that adapted to whatever you had left. Cheap, fast, and tasted like the kitchen your childhood remembers even if you cannot name the address anymore. Here is the thing. These are the dinners that built Mexican families. Not the restaurant specials, not the weekend celebrations. The quiet Tuesday meals made from a lifetime of knowing how to stretch what you had. Nobody writes cookbooks about picadillo, but it fed more people than any mole ever did. Number 18. Caldo tlalpeno. A Mexico City classic that most Mexican Americans have never heard of. Chicken simmered with chickpeas, chipotle peppers, carrots, zucchini, avocado, and epazote. The chipotle gives the broth a smoky heat that sets it apart from other chicken soups in Mexico. One story says President Antonio López de Santa Anna woke with a terrible hangover at his holiday house in Tlalpan, a neighborhood in southern Mexico City. He asked his cook to make something that would bring him back to life, and she made chicken soup with chipotle. Whether that story is true or not, the soup works. The chickpeas give it body and substance, and the avocado melts into the smoky broth. A bowl of caldo tlalpeno cost $2.50 to make at home. The hangover cure that became a family dinner, smoky and spicy, with avocado melting into the broth. If you grew up in Mexico City, you know this soup. If you grew up anywhere else, you probably have never heard of it. A dish born in the streets that never crossed the border the way tacos and the burritos did. Number 17. Papazules. This is a dinner from before Mexico was Mexico. Ancient Mayan cuisine from the Yucatan Peninsula. Corn tortillas filled with chopped boiled egg, topped with two sauces. One sauce is a bright green pepita sauce made from ground pumpkin seeds. The other is a mild chiltomate, a simple tomato salsa. The pumpkin seed sauce gives it an earthy flavor and a color unlike anything else in Mexican cooking. The dish predates Spanish colonization. The Maya made papazules with the same pumpkin seeds and eggs you can buy at any grocery store today. Almost nobody outside the Yucatan knows this dish exists. An entire civilization's dinner, forgotten by the rest of the country. Taste Atlas lists it among the most important dishes of Yucatecan gastronomy. You will not find it in any Mexican restaurant in the United States. You will not find it in most Mexican restaurants in Mexico City. A masterpiece hiding in plain sight for over 1,000 years. A tradition that survived colonization, but could not survive being ignored. Number 16. Relleno negro, a wedding dish from the Yucatan that looks like midnight in a bowl. Turkey slow-cooked in recado negro, a jet black spice paste made from charred chile peppers. The charring is what gives it that darkness. The chiles are roasted until they are completely black, then ground into a paste with Yucatecan spices and mixed with the cooking liquid. A hard-boiled egg is tucked inside. The result is a stew so dark it looks like something from another world. The color scared children at wedding banquets. But one taste and you understood why. This was turkey the way it was meant to be eaten, not roasted dry the way it is served at Thanksgiving. Slow cooked in spices until the meat surrendered completely. Relleno negro is one of the oldest and most traditional Yucatecan recipes, served at weddings and celebrations for centuries. A dish that turned the darkest color in the kitchen into the most beautiful flavor on the table. If you have tasted it, you never forgot. The charring process takes hours, and the kitchen fills with smoke that stings your eyes. That was the price of something this good. Number 15. Manchamanteles, the tablecloth stainer. One of the 7 traditional moles of Oaxaca, and the one with the wildest ingredient list. Pork loin simmered in a sauce made from chipotle chiles, ancho chiles, roasted tomatoes, peanuts, pineapple, and plantain. Fruit and meat, chiles and nuts, all in one pot. The sauce was so rich and so red that it permanently stained whatever it touched. That is how it got its name, manchamanteles. Stains tablecloths. Mama's white tablecloth with that one red stain that never came out. She would point to it every Sunday and say that was your tío's fault. Susana Trilling, in her book My Search for the Seventh Mole, questioned whether manchamanteles was even a true mole. The debate does not matter to the families who made it. What matters is that it was the mole you could actually finish in one afternoon, not the 3-day commitment of mole negro. A beautiful, powerful mole that left its mark on the cloth and on the memory. The kind of stain you never wanted to wash out, because it reminded you of the best Sunday your family ever had. Number 14. Tinga de pollo. Shredded chicken in a smoky chipotle tomato sauce, piled onto crispy tostadas with crema, queso fresco, and shredded lettuce. Tinga originated in Puebla in the late 1800s, during the colonial era. It was a resourceful way to use leftover chicken or pork. Indigenous cooking techniques combined with Spanish ingredients to create something entirely new. Thursday night tinga tostadas. Mom shredded the chicken while the kids set the table. Everyone built their own tostada. You piled on as much chicken and crema as you could before the tostada cracked in half and everything spilled onto your plate. That was half the fun. Simple, communal, and gone from most kitchens. Tinga was Puebla's celebration food, but it was also the weeknight dinner that brought the whole family to the table. A dish that proved the best meals are the ones where everyone gets to build their own. The kind of dinner where the table was messy and the conversation was loud and nobody cared. Puebla knew what it was doing. Number 13. Mole de olla. The revolutionaries' dinner. When there was nothing, there was mole de olla. The name comes from the Nahuatl word tilemolli. Tetel meaning fire, and moli meaning sauce. Fire sauce. Pre-Hispanic chile sauces, blended with colonial Spanish stewing techniques to create a brothy, lighter mole. Nothing like the thick sauces most people imagine when they hear the word mole. Beef simmered with dried chiles, zucchini, chayote, green beans, corn on the cob, and potatoes. Whatever vegetables the land gave you. During the Mexican Revolution, the soldaderas. The women who followed the armies prepared mole de olla using whatever they could find. A pot, some chiles, seasonal vegetables, and beef bones from the butcher for almost nothing. This is what survival tasted like. It was delicious. A one-pot meal born from war and poverty that turned simple ingredients into something that made you forget how little you had. Now, this was never restaurant food. This was the dinner that existed only in homes. And when those homes stopped cooking it, it started disappearing. A dish that fed soldiers and families through the hardest years in Mexican history, now fading because nobody has a reason to cook from necessity anymore. But necessity was what made it beautiful. Number 12. Carne en su jugo. Meat in its juices. Born in the late 1960s in Guadalajara, Jalisco. Legend says it was first made and served to drunk people walking the streets at night, to help sober them up. A restaurant called El Gallo in Guadalajara is credited with creating it. Beef browned in bacon fat, simmered with tangy tomatillo salsa and pinto beans, topped with crumbled bacon, diced onion, fresh cilantro, radishes, and a squeeze of lime. The cure for everything. Late night Guadalajara after the party, after the dancing. There was always a place open serving carne en su jugo. The beans gave it substance. The tomatillo salsa gave it brightness. The bacon gave it a smoky richness that made you forget how late it was. A dish born in the streets that made its way to family dinner tables across Jalisco. One of the signature dishes of the state. Yet most Mexican Americans have never tasted it. It is still waiting in Guadalajara for anyone willing to look for it. Number 11. Tortas ahogadas. Drowned sandwiches. Invented in Guadalajara in the 1920s by a man named Luis de la Torre, known as El Güero for his red hair. According to legend, El Güero accidentally dropped an entire sandwich into a pot of spicy salsa. And a legend was born. The bread is virote salado, a Mexican sourdough with a thick, crunchy crust that holds up against the sauce. It is stuffed with carnitas and refried beans, then submerged in a fiery arbol chile sauce made with vinegar, cumin, garlic, and oregano. You can order it media ahogada, half drowned, or bien ahogada, fully submerged until no bubbles come up. Either way, you eat it with bare hands, sauce dripping down your arms, bread falling apart. Laughing because there is no dignified way to eat this thing. Over 1,150 purveyors sell tortas ahogadas in Guadalajara alone. 1,300 across the state. When did dinner stop being this fun? Number 10. Discada Nortena. Dad and the tios stood outside around the disco, beer in hand, arguing about whose meat selection was the best. Smoke rose into the evening sky. This was how men in northern Mexico bonded. Not with words, but with fire and meat. Discada was born in the early 20th century, possibly around the Mexican Revolution in the states of Coahuila, Durango, Chihuahua, and Nuevo León. Farmers and soldiers repurposed old plow disc blades as cooking surfaces over wood fires. They sealed the holes, added handles, and welded borders around the edges. In the American Southwest, people call them cowboy walks. Mixed meats go onto the disc: beef, pork, bacon, chorizo, sometimes venison, onions, tomatoes, jalapenos, and a splash of beer. Every family has their own combination. You do not follow a recipe for discada, you follow tradition. The tradition your father taught you, which his father taught him. It was about standing around that fire together. Number 9. Sopa de albóndigas. Watching Abuela roll tiny meatballs at the kitchen table. The rice inside each one was the secret. No measuring cups, no recipe cards, just hands that knew. The word albóndigas comes from the Arabic albunduk, meaning hazelnut, something small and round. Spanish conquistadors brought the concept to Mexico, and Mexican cooks transformed it into something entirely their own. Beef meatballs with cooked rice folded into the center, simmered in a tomato broth with carrots, potatoes, cilantro, and a sprig of mint. The mint is what separates Mexican albóndigas from every other meatball soup in the world. One cook learned from her mother. Who learned from hers? The grandmother stood beside her as a newlywed and walked her through it step by step. These recipes were never written down. A little of this, a dash of that, about this much. When Abuela passed, the exact proportions went with her. You can try to recreate it. You can get close. But you will never get it exactly right. That is the price of a tradition that lives only in memory. Number 8. Asado de boda. The stew that sealed a marriage. In Zacatecas and San Luis Potosí, the groom's family prepared this dish for the bride's family as confirmation of the union. Pork shoulder chunks, slow cooked in a thick, velvety sauce made from chile ancho, chile guajillo, roasted tomatoes, cumin, cinnamon, bay leaf, cloves, and peppercorns. The preparation started days before the wedding. Family members gathered to clean, chop, and cook massive batches in pots big enough to bathe the child in. An alternative legend says asado de boda originated during the Mexican Revolution when Pancho Villa arrived in Zacatecas and asked for pork and chiles to celebrate, whether it was a wedding or a revolution. The dish was the same slow, rich, communal, served at weddings, baptisms, quinceañeras, and anniversaries with white rice, beans, and handmade tortillas. Pork shoulder cost about $3 a pound. The dried chiles cost even less. The most expensive ingredient was time, and the whole family paid that cost together. When did we stop marking life's biggest moments with food that took everyone to make? When did a catered buffet replace a pot the whole family stirred? Here is what nobody talks about. The dinners on this list were not just meals. They were the way Mexican families organized their lives. Sunday meant caldo. Thursday meant tinga. Wedding meant asado. The calendar was built around what was cooking. When the cooking stopped, the calendar fell apart. The family dinners that brought everyone to the table once a week became group chats. The recipes that took all day turned into 30-minute shortcuts from the internet. The house that used to smell like chile and cumin for hours now smells like nothing, because the stove has not been turned on since Tuesday, and something was lost that a recipe card cannot bring back. The feeling of a house full of people and a kitchen full of steam and the knowledge that tonight, nobody eats alone. Number 7. Carne a la tampiquena. The Mexican combination plate that started it all. In 1939, José Inés Loredo and his brother, Chef Fidel Loredo, created this dish at their restaurant Tampico Club in Mexico City. They called it Almuerzo Huasteco, a tribute to the Huasteca region near Tampico. The plate combined grilled skirt steak, green enchiladas, refried black beans, guacamole, queso fresco, and rajas poblanas, sautéed poblano strips with onions, all on one plate. Before restaurants across Mexico served combination plates, the Loredo brothers invented the concept. It became a staple on fonda menus across the entire country. Now it is on every menu, but nobody knows the name. Nobody remembers the Loredo brothers, or the Tampico Club, or that this dish was originally served as breakfast. It is a plate of food that shaped how an entire nation eats at restaurants, and the men who created it have been forgotten. You have eaten a version of this plate 100 times without knowing its name or the story behind it. Number 6. Enchiladas mineras. Miners' enchiladas. Born in Guanajuato during the colonial silver mining boom. The wives of miners needed to prepare nutritious, economical, and flavorful meals for men working underground all day. Guanajuato has been a mining town since the colonial era, the leading national producer of gold and the fourth largest producer of silver. What began as homemade food, carried in tin containers, became the culinary symbol of an entire state. Corn tortillas dipped in guajillo chile sauce with garlic, cumin, and oregano, filled with onions, cheese, and stewed carrots and potatoes. Traditionally vegetarian because meat was too expensive for daily meals. Taste Atlas rated enchiladas mineras 4.2 out of 5 stars as the most representative dish of Guanajuato. A love letter wrapped in a tortilla, packed by a wife who would not see her husband until sundown. Now almost nobody outside Guanajuato knows this dish exists. The mines are museums now. The enchiladas are memories. A dinner born from love and silver, and the kind of devotion that deserves to be remembered. Number 5. Caldo de res. Sunday dinner that no longer happens. Beef shank simmered with corn on the cob, carrots, potatoes, zucchini, cabbage, chayote, cilantro, and lime. The pot had been on the stove since dawn. After Mass, the whole family gathered at Abuela's house, Grandma Jesucita's famous caldo, her kitchen filled with laughter and the smell of bone broth that had been pulling flavor from those beef shanks for 6 hours. Caldo de res is one of the oldest traditions in Mexican cooking. Bone broth-based soups that go back centuries. The beef shank was the cheapest cut at the carniceria, about $1.50 per pound. The vegetables came from the garden or the weekend market. The whole pot cost less than $8 and fed 12 people. You ate it in large bowls with a squeeze of lime, a handful of cilantro, and a stack of warm tortillas on the side. It is a Sunday thing. That is what people always said. But Sundays changed. Families scattered. The kitchen that used to hold 15 people now holds 1. And the pot that simmered since dawn does not get made anymore because there is nobody left to fill the bowls. Number 4. Chile Colorado. This was the Saturday night dinner that filled the whole house with the smell of toasting chiles. In northern Mexico, in Chihuahua and Sonora, Sonoran cowboy culture shaped this stew. It has deep roots in ranching traditions, where dried meat and dried chiles were the foundation of everything. You started by rehydrating guajillo, ancho, and árbol chiles, then blending them into a smooth red sauce with garlic, cumin, and oregano. You seared beef stew meat in a hot pot until it browned on all sides. Then you poured that red chile sauce over the meat and let it simmer low and slow for about an hour, until the beef was fall-apart tender. It was served with Mexican rice and beans. Beef stew meat was the cheapest cut available. Families stretched it with rice and tortillas, so a couple of pounds fed everyone at the table. Papa would come in from working the yard, and the pot was already simmering. The whole family knew dinner was ready by the smell alone. Simple ingredients, easy preparation. A dinner that has been feeding families for generations and now sits forgotten next to the dried chiles nobody knows how to use anymore. Number 3. Pozole. New Year's Eve. The pot big enough to feed the entire neighborhood. Abuela standing at the stove all day. The sound of shredding cabbage and squeezing limes. The name comes from the Nahuatl word pozole, meaning a stew of maize kernels. This was a sacred dish of the Aztec Empire, consumed on special occasions honoring gods like Tlaloc, the god of rain. Hominy corn simmered with pork, garlic, cumin, and dried chiles. Garnished with radish, shredded cabbage, oregano, lime, and served with crispy tostadas. 3 varieties exist across Mexico: rojo, verde, and blanco. Red, green, and white. Each region claims theirs is the original. Pozole was the gathering dish, the one that required the biggest pot in the house, the one that brought cousins you had not seen in months. Families do not gather like that anymore. The pot sits in the back of the cabinet. The recipe is still there, but the occasion is gone. A dish that survived 500 years of history, but could not survive the modern calendar. Number 2. Chiles en nogada. The dish you only ate once a year, around Mexican Independence Day in September, when pomegranates were in season. Poblano chiles stuffed with picadillo, a filling of minced meat mixed with fruits and spices, topped with walnut cream sauce and pomegranate seeds. Green, white, and red, the 3 colors of the Mexican flag on a plate. A patriotic sight. Legend says nuns at a convent in Puebla created this dish in August of 1821 for Agustín de Iturbide, after he signed the Treaty of Córdoba, establishing Mexico's independence from Spain. The walnut sauce had to be perfect, white as the flag. Mama spent all day stuffing those chiles, and pomegranate seeds were scattered across the top like jewels. This dish connected dinner to national pride. It was the one meal where cooking felt like freedom. Seasonal, labor-intensive, impossible to mass-produce, and tied to the land in a way no factory could replicate. The ultimate Mexican dinner. Pause 1 second. Number 1. Mole negro. The king of all moles, from Oaxaca, the land of 7 moles. It can use 20 to 30 ingredients, multiple dried chiles, chocolate, nuts, seeds, and spices ground together and simmered for hours. Traditionally, the preparation took 1 to 3 days. The word mole comes from the Nahuatl word moli, meaning sauce or concoction. Its roots reach back to the Aztec and Mayan civilizations, a fusion of indigenous and European colonial influences, with threads reaching as far as Iran and North Africa. Oaxaca's 7 moles are amarillo, chichilo, rojo, manchamantel, verde, coloradito, and negro. Negro is the darkest, the deepest, the most complex. Making mole negro was the dish that took 3 days and the whole family to participate. The grinding stone, the toasting chiles that made everyone's eyes water, children running through the kitchen while tias argued about how much chocolate to add. Nobody has 3 days anymore. The jars replaced the metate, and the mole that used to fill the house with smoke and laughter now comes from a jar heated in the microwave. The flavor is close, but the memory is not the same. Here is my challenge. Make one of these dinners this week. Just one. The chile colorado, the sopa de fideo, the caldo de res. Then do something your abuela would recognize. Set the table. Use a real plate. Sit down and eat it slow. Because these dinners were never just about being cheap or being easy or being fast. They were about gathering. They were about a kitchen that smelled like someone cared enough to cook. They were about the quiet act of feeding your family the same meal your mother made and her mother made before her. I am not a doctor or a dietitian. This is not medical advice. This is just looking at how things used to be. Tell me in the comments which dinner you are going to make first. I want to know if the pozole gets more love than the mole negro. I want to know if anyone still has the metate in their kitchen, or if it is in the garage gathering dust like mine. I want to know if Dona Lupe's enchiladas mineras remind you of someone in your family who packed food with that same kind of love. Because these are not just recipes. These are the dinners that held Mexican families together. And the table is still there, waiting.